I have said this not once, not twice, but 3 times already. And every new clip, every new interview, every press release that I see about Wuthering Heights by Emerald Fennell just keeps proving my point right. This film is not an adaptation of Emily Bronte's novel. This film is actually a self-insert fanfiction where Emerald Fennell, the director of the film, is actually the main character. And those two are actually very different things. Because the more the cast speaks, the clearer it becomes that they all believe that Wuthering Heights is about obsessive love, sexual tension, and sadomasochistic desires. And if that is what you think this book is about, you really did not understand this book at all. Hello my gorgeous viewers and readers, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. I hope your weekend was filled with cold mornings, freezing wetlands, and the slight realization that even incredibly talented filmmakers can also completely misunderstand the art they are adapting. Today we are talking about Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights. And to be completely honest, when I first saw the cast, I was confused. And then the trailer came out and I was even more confused and worried. And now that all the press releases, that all these interviews are coming out, honestly, I am just convinced that this is not Wuthering Heights. This is just a book-talked, dark romance psychosexual version that has stripped the novel of all its meaning. We don't talk about colonialism. We don't talk about racism. We don't talk about generational trauma, which is exactly what constitutes Wuthering Heights. This is why I say that this film is not Wuthering Heights. As much as Emerald Fennell wants to call it Wuthering Heights or wants to put quote unquote, this is not Wuthering Heights. This is just another film adaptation that makes absolutely no sense. And let me tell you why. Before we even touch the film, let's make something very clear. Wuthering Heights is not a love story. It is a story about revenge. Heathcliff is not a Byronic romantic hero, just as Emerald Fennell loves to call him. Heathcliff is an abused, deeply traumatized, racially ordered child who actually grows into a man whose main purpose in life is to actually bring revenge to society and to all the people that have ordered him. His violence is not romantic, it is deeply political. His cruelty is not passionate. It is the result of humiliation, radicalization, and class degradation. In the books, Heathcliff is described as dark-skinned, foreign, possibly Romani, South Asian, or even black, and possibly from the colonies. And taking into account that York is very, very closely related to Liverpool, which was one of the biggest slave trade cities in the whole entire of UK, it wouldn't be strange for Heathcliff to be an immigrant and to be of a person of color. All the characters treat him as racially inferior. He is called slurs. He is called ugly and dirty because he is not white-skinned. He is also treated as less than a human. In fact, he is treated like a slave for many, many years. And this part is essential to the plot. This is what makes Heathcliff be Heathcliff, right? This is why he becomes vengeful. That's why he acts like a villain, because he has been villainized and he has been dehumanized. Because Heathcliff, at the end of the day, is the embodiment of colonial subject, right? He is exactly what like a slave was back in the days, right? He is brought into English society, but he is still dehumanized and he is still treated like property. And Kathy's choice to marry Edgar is not romantic betrayal. It is actually class betrayal, because she chooses whiteness. She chooses status over the boy that she has been in love with for the past 15 years. And that is what creates Heathcliff. It's not sexual obsession. It's actually social humiliation. Now, let's contrast this with what Emerald Fennell and the rest of the cast have mentioned in the interviews. So, starting strong, Emerald Fennell mentions in multiple interviews that she is focused on the sadomasochistic elements of Wuthering Heights. I don't know what book you've read, but there are no sadomasochistic elements. I think that's your interpretation, but I personally think that there is no sadomasochism, because if you're confusing sadomasochism with abuse and trauma, I think that's for you to heal. I think that is projection. That is not the reality of the book. And that is something that you have to deal with it yourself. And then she also mentions that Kathy is a little monster. And I think that's doing the character a disservice, because actually she's not a little monster. She is an extremely abused and traumatized child. So you calling her a monster, the only thing that makes is you're making a villain out of a victim, which is, again, victim mentality. Well, not victim mentality, but what you're doing is just literally blaming the victim. You're victim blaming. And then one of the things that I found really strange was the fact that both Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi have mentioned that the more they play their characters, so obviously Kathy and Heathcliff, the more obsessed they became with each other, right? So obviously Margot mentions that she was obsessed with Jacob Elordi, that she felt like as if she was in love, right? And Jacob Elordi has mentioned the same thing. To me, this sounds like, first of all, you didn't correctly interpret the characters, because as much as I can say that Heathcliff is in love with Kathy, I think what he is obsessed with is actually revenge. He's not obsessed with Kathy. Like, in fact, he chooses revenge over Kathy multiple times. So to me, that seems like a poor description of the character from Emerald Fennell, and also a poor interpretation of the character from the actors or actresses themselves. And then lastly, this is actually my favorite, and this is something that Emerald Fennell mentioned, and she says that Wuthering Heights is about how to love an unlovable character. Personally, I don't think you can be more wrong about what Wuthering Heights really truly is about. To me, this sounds as if they are consistently mislabeling the story as toxic love, obsession, destructive passion, and also sexual tension. And to me, this is a modern misreading of the book. What you're actually doing is just creating a story that is deeply influenced by modern dark romance. They are reading Heathcliff as a dark romance male lead, but that's not what he is. He is a victim turned perpetrator after all the abuse that he experiences. But if you take away all this context, of course you will see an incredibly sexy and hot, emotionally tortured man. But that's not what he is. He is a man who has experienced class brutality, extreme racism, and extreme poverty. And that is why casting a white man as Heathcliff is also a conscious choice. This is not something that has been made neutral. This is not a neutral decision. This is actually erasure of the character. What becomes very uncomfortable is seeing how fascinated everyone involved in this film is with the erotic charge between Kathy and Heathcliff, because in the books, there is no sexual tension, or at least there is no obvious sexual tension between the two characters. And actually, I would go as far as say that their relationship is not erotic at all, right? It is very feral, violent, spiritual, and also incredibly childish, but more importantly, it is twisted, it is toxic, because these two characters are not characters that have like sexual tension between each other. What they are is they are two people who are incredibly abused, who cling between each other in order to like hold themselves against a world that is abusing them. That is Kathy's and Heathcliff's relationship, two abused people who are like against the world. But Fennell's language actually translates all of this into adult, erotic, and sadomasochistic desire. And that translation perfectly aligns with modern audiences, especially the ones who actually focus on dark romantasy or dark romance and who romanticize toxicity, right? That is something that aligns very well with them, which I think is actually exactly why Fennell has translated Wuthering Heights into what it is now, or into what the film is trying to represent, because she knows that this will be extremely successful in these audiences. But in fact, this is not Bronte's lens, this is ours, right? And adapting the book to translate into our lens means that we are losing the original source. We are losing the original meaning of the novel. Now, I'm going to say something very unpopular and slightly problematic, but all of this that I have mentioned until now, to me, proves the original point of this video, that actually we are not seeing an adaptation of Wuthering Heights. We are seeing a version that Emerald Fennell desires. We are seeing Emerald Fennell's true fantasy, right? This is exactly what we are seeing. We are not seeing Wuthering Heights. We are seeing Emerald Fennell's fantasy. Because the way she speaks about Kathy, how she sees her as a monster, as something that is horrendous, right? Or something that is like so deeply flawed, but also at the same time, how much she protects Heathcliff, right? How much she accepts how ugly or how monstrous Heathcliff is, right? Even though Heathcliff is actually worse than Kathy in the books, but that doesn't matter. Like, I see how much she cares about Heathcliff and how much she like hates or like quote unquote hates Kathy, but also the way she emphasizes the sadomasochistic erotic side of their relationship, even though there is not that much. To me, that doesn't sound like artistic liberties or literary interpretation. To me, this sounds like projection. In all honesty, and this is not an attack to her, but to me, this sounds as if Emerald Fennell read the book when she was 14 years old, and she related so much to Kathy, right? She related to her as an outcast, as a monster, as someone who is different and someone who is not accepted, right? And she like fell in love with Heathcliff as a teenager or as a preteen because she felt as if there would be someone to be a villain with, to be an outcast with, right? To have to finally be accompanied, not to be alone as a monster. She feels as if she's projecting this image in Wuthering Heights, right? Rather than actually like looking at the book at face value or at cover value. What she is doing is projecting her own her own baggage and her own insecurities in this book. That's why to me it feels as if this film is actually just a projection, sorry. Because if you actually look into the story, or if you look at the film, to me it is really obvious that she is inserting herself in this story, right? Because we allegedly, please take this into account that this is alleged, there is no confirmation or validation, but to me it looks as if Emerald Fennell chose Margot Robbie on purpose because they are both of similar age, they are both blonde with blue eyes, and then we all know how obsessed Emerald Fennell is with Jacob Elordi, again, allegedly. But yeah, it seems to me as if she saw Jacob Elordi and she immediately thought of Heathcliff, right? And this is something that she actually says in the interviews. But to me, it seems as if like she suddenly got awakened with this intense feeling of wanting to create Wuthering Heights because she can finally make her projection true. She can actually make her own fantasy reality. Even from the start, I feel like Emerald Fennell did not look at the book and say, what is the author trying to say? Which is how people should read books. What she is actually doing, or what she actually did, is how did this book make me feel, right? And obviously, at the end of the day, there are always blurred lines between what an author is trying to say and your own literary interpretation. That's why books are so fascinating. But they are not the same thing. These two questions don't say the same answer, or they usually don't say the same thing, right? Because what Fennell is seeing in Wuthering Heights is like what she is projecting, or what she is allegedly projecting, which is she's looking for an intensely sexual, torturous, and tumultuous relationship. And she is looking for two monsters that clash with each other and who are so intensely like emotional that just destroys everything around them, right? That's why she always takes, or like she talks about this sadomasochism, right? Because she is looking at these two characters as monsters who not only want to destroy themselves, but they also destroy each other because they don't care. They just want to own these things. They just want to get all these abuse outside from their body and just try to heal in their own way, but they don't really want to heal as well. It's just like she's just looking for all this toxicity and for all this abuse, but she is not looking at the characters. She is looking at what she thinks of the characters. And when you look at the film as what it is, which is a self-insert fan fiction of Wuthering Heights, then everything makes so much sense, right? The costumes make sense, the casting makes sense, the marketing, all these interviews make sense, because what they are doing is they are not creating an adaptation of Wuthering Heights. They are fulfilling a fantasy for all those people who love dark romance, who are desiring something that is extremely erotic, deeply psychosexual, and very much tumultuous and toxic and almost abusive in a way, right? But the problem here is that when you are using an original source, or when you are using a classic that talks about that is highly political, highly regarded as one of the first books or first novels that talks about racial issues, classism issues, then what you're doing is you're not creating an adaptation, you're erasing the meaning of the adaptation. And look, Emerald Fennell is an incredibly talented director. I'm not going to take that from her. But this adaptation is showing us a fundamental problem with modern adaptations of classics, because many of us are not adapting the book. What we are doing is we are creating a new version based on how we felt of an original source. And that's not an adaptation. What you're doing is you're creating something new. So then you shouldn't be using the original source at all. You should just say that you're like loosely influenced by, right? But this is why I think that modern adaptations tend to suck, because at the end of the day, what you are doing is that you are catering to modern audiences. You're not adapting, you are creating something that you know would be successful. That's all for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you have read the book, Wuthering Heights, I want to know if you are as me or like me, feeling like this film is going to be shit and then we're going to forget about it for the next year. Or if you have read the book, are you actually excited to watch this film? Just let me know in the comments. I would love to know your opinion. And yeah, again, thank you so much for watching. And if you want more content about Wuthering Heights, books, or classics in general, or Gothic literature, you can follow me on my social media as well. I post there every day. But yeah, again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you soon. Bye, guys.